Welcome back. It is episode 126. I'm your host, Jacob Harris, and this podcast is brought to you by Achievement Apex and Power Pit Rockingham, now in association with Ped Test Australia and Bulk Gym Chalk. And we are also now sponsored by Supplement Mart. So shout out to those guys. Today I am joined by Benny Price. Thanks for being here, man.
Thank you so much for having me at the end of essentially having had me for 3 days back to back, and the fact that we're still keen to chat further, I think says a lot.
I was going to say, it says a lot about us that we've still got more to talk about,
Yeah.
but it shows that we were listening,
Mm,
which is the most important thing.
indeed.
Is
Yeah.
listening. And first of all, I'm going to, before we move into the talking about you, because there's many questions I have, I need to be hydrated, and I'm going to do so with some thirst trap, and I will continuously, shamelessly plug this water. Wow, the sound.
I would drink it just for the name, to be quite frank. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's slightly concerning a name to be carrying around, but it's just so clever.
it is.
It's just so clever. I love it.
And the colors were a smart choice because it
Yeah.
makes it look really fancy.
It just, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel baller, mate.
Well, I mean, we're sitting in the middle of a gym, and we've got our thirst trap, and we've got the full setup. It's the way to do it. I have so many questions, but I guess I'll start with, as someone who just spent the last 3 days explaining exercise to me, and I thought I knew a lot more than I apparently do. When did you start your journey with exercise? And maybe for context, how old are you exactly?
I am currently 32.
Okay. And so when did you, I guess, first start training yourself?
So I started training myself because I was like a short, stubby, chubby little kid for like a really long time.
Lumpy, even.
Yeah, lumpy even.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I think was remarkable is that as a stat, so I grew up in Singapore and Malaysia, and in a primarily Asian school. Even at the age of like 15 or 16, I was the third shortest kid, girls included, in my year of like 100, 120 kids. Like I was tiny.
Wow.
And then I had like a growth spurt where at one point I grew 5 inches in 7 months. Like I just shot up around the age of 17 or 18. But the problem with that is I ended up stick skinny. And my two favorite hobbies as like sports were rugby and kickboxing, both of which kickboxing is okay if you're really skinny. Like you can kind of end up with like a nice like reach advances. Rugby, there's no benefit to being lanky and skinny. But as I then went through uni and I got quite competitive with my kickboxing and with coaching it and stuff, I had to move weight classes, and that's probably just primarily because of also the added calories from like university drinking and all that stuff. But when I had to move weight classes, there was a point where I was like trying to cut below a certain number, and then I was like, I need to go, up from here, otherwise I'm just going to keep getting absolutely battered by people like and it was just weight classes, right? So when I moved up a little bit, I was suddenly in like a heavier weight class, which meant a lot of the time older men. Like I was an 18, 19-year-old that was skinny as piss, and then also getting beat up by men in their late 30s, 40s, whatever. So that's when I was like, how do I put on weight without also getting chubby? Okay, I'm gonna have to start taking this training stuff seriously. And I wish I'd taken it seriously earlier on, like when I was younger. Like there were friends of mine in school that took going to the gym and training a little bit more seriously. And I could so have gone with them when I was in my sort of late teens. I could so have been better at sports that I was not anywhere near as good as I could have been at that age.
Hmm.
And like stuff like rugby, like I was awful at it, despite loving it, until I was in at least my mid to late 20s. And the only reason I got decent at it is suddenly my legs had a bit more muscle on them and I was no longer as pathetically slow. And I was able to not get absolutely folded in two every time I went into contact with someone. But it was very much driven initially by just wanting to be a better size and strength for playing sports. It's never really been. I've never wanted to necessarily look a certain way. That's never been a driving factor. Um, but I've also always been quite like geeky and technical about things. Like the thing that I loved about martial arts growing up is it was always for me like this pursuit of technical excellence. Like I preferred training to fighting primarily because I was really good at the training stuff, like the technique stuff, and I don't have very quick reflexes. So the fighting stuff was quite depressing. The only reason I ever got good at the fighting was I'd just been through these things so many times that I could read someone. But as soon as they did something I wasn't expecting, I was toast. But yeah, the technical side of it was always that. And so that's kind of why I ended up geeking out a lot about the gym over time as well, right? Like that same pursuit of mastering movement and technique translated from, okay, as opposed to doing like a spinning, jumping back kick type thing, I'm now going to see if I can, keep my scapula still while I do a chest press.
Which is, yeah, it can be important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then you said you were at uni. That's when you were doing the mechanical engineering.
Yeah. So that's when I studied mechanical engineering, and that was my bachelor's. I think I mentioned that the other day that I chose it because I was good at it. It just lended. I initially wanted to be an architect. That was what I was passionate about, and then I can't draw, so I took art. Like I got kicked out basically of art, high school A levels, whatever you call that here, like Form 6. What was it get called? Like your last 2 years of school? What's that called in Australia?
We probably have a better name for it. I just called it year 11 and 12.
Oh yeah, okay. So year 11 and 12, I got kicked out of art class and got told to go to DT where you were allowed to like use rulers and like CAD and stuff to draw because I couldn't draw. And I was like, shit, I can't be an architect.
That sucks that you couldn't draw. So that was the problem.
Yeah,
Like,
it was.
yeah.
Like we went, you have like these university open days where like they invite you over to kind of talk about the degree you want to do and all this kind of shit. So you go to these talks and this guy is like, you want to be an architect? Oh, great. This is some of the stuff our students do. And I'm looking at it going, "But how did they draw those?" He's like, freehand. I'm like, oh no, I'm toast. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I thought the mathematics side of things would have been,
yeah, that's what I thought as well.
yeah.
I like building things as well. So like I was quite good at building like the models that were required for architectural stuff. I went on a work experience and loved it, but in order to get a good degree in it, you've got to be able to draw. And
Mm.
I was just rubbish at it. So yeah, I went down I kind of shifted over to the engineering side of things, and that hit the like mechanics and physics and formulaic thought process skill sets. And I was like, okay, cool, this works. I can do this.
That's carried over nicely to what you do now.
Yeah, man. I think it's also really almost directed me into what I do now as well, because the thing that I always liked about engineering and the thing that I couldn't stand about some of the other subjects that I could have taken, like I quite enjoyed English. I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved doing a lot of the stuff that is involved in being good at English in school, but I I, I couldn't do the exams. Just the thought that someone's opinion and feelings and perception of something that I've created could determine whether or not I got a good grade, and that there wasn't a like a black and white right or wrong about it. That just drove me nuts.
Mm.
And then I'd second guess myself when I was writing it. I'm like, how am I trying? Am I trying to write what I want to express? Am I trying to write what they want to hear? And then I'd just be outraged sometimes when I thought I've nailed it, and then they're going, no, some person decided that was not what they were looking for. Whereas down the engineering side of things, if you either had the answer or you didn't. You weren't like writing out, oh, here's how I feel about something. You'd show your work, show your formula to how you got somewhere. And I liked that there was different ways you could do that. I used to do like these weird things where I'd almost like test myself to see how many formulas I could not know going into exams, and then wing it and figure out how to figure out the answer without using the actual thing you're meant to do. I used to love that stuff. But the fact that there was a defined right or wrong to it was quite nice. And that's why the sort of exercise mechanics side of things that I've gone into is there is no better or worse or right or wrong exercise necessarily. So it's like keeping that process, but at the same time, like it's physics. A moment arm is either shorter or longer. It's not up to someone's going, oh yeah, well I couldn't give two shits how you feel about it.
Mm.
This is objective science, and it's not based on experiments that someone has come up with, and there's all these flaws in this experiment and that experiment. Like the way we run human experiments about exercise is so different to how I would run any of the experiments I had to do at university. Like none of the exercise experiments that get run out there at the moment would qualify as an engineering experiment because there's way too many variables that haven't been accounted for. And so that's why I'm just like, okay, from I don't know, the science background that I come from, exercise experiments don't hold a lot of appeal. because there's too many flaws for me to appreciate many of the conclusions that people are drawing out the back of them. But a lot of the stuff where we look at the stimulus side of things instead, and we go, okay, what is actually happening here? What have we aligned with what? Then that stuff's more defined and I can get my head around it a bit more. I'm not saying either is better than the other. I'm just saying from like the perspective that I kind of came into things with, one just aligns better with the way my brain works than the other.
I have to say, probably the thing for me about it is the resistance side of it and getting my head around that, right? Because we talked about it with the leg press, and it's like, to what extent do I not just add bands to everything and keep on adding as many as I can? And why am I even using weight? And learning about that and why you still want to use things in a certain way, because it's like, if I just make it harder with bands, even if I just say chuck a 20 aside and keep making it harder with bands, it's going to get to a point where I can't make it any harder anyway. So why would I ever load 200 kilos on it if the resistance can just be, if I can just double, triple, quadruple the resistance to the point where it's so hard that I don't need to put any more weight on it?
And I mean, we could come up with various reasons why that might be the case. Well, I mean, if we're just talking about that in particular, right? Like if your goal is to just grow your legs and to have as little stress on your joints as possible in the process, and you're going to need some weight on there for certain portions of the range, but you could probably use like multiple bands at different portions and achieve this with maybe like some offloading, some onloading, and all sorts of stuff, right? Like, you could probably achieve what you're looking for with just bands. And if the goal was just stimulus relative to tax, then that might achieve the objective. If we're talking like with clients and we're going, oh, well, actually, I'd like them to be really capable at producing force and managing what happens in the real world when you have to do that, which is the effects of inertia. Or maybe from a functional and practical carryover, I might want to actually put some plates on there and get them used to, handling inertia as part of the process of producing force. But yeah, I mean, but that's what I like about this and appreciate about it is that even though it's black and white, like even though there is a black and white, like that is how much resistance you have added, and that is the force repercussions of it, and that's the inertia that you've taken out of it, and that's the way that now the force changes over the course of an exercise, and like there's no emotions about that. It's not like, oh well, yeah, but I think it. No, it's A or B, and then there's the relationship of that resistance to your joints throughout that process, and there is a very objective scientific black or white difference between when you make these adjustments, but whether or not that's appropriate, whether or not that could be refined or made more efficient or made more conducive to the intended outcome that you've got, that's almost still like a bit of an art. And it's not pure like A or B science. And there's still a bit of, okay, well, what if we did this? And the reasoning behind that why could vary. So it again, that's why there's not a right or wrong. And that's why there's not like a definitive answer to that question. But at least the things that it depends on are generally rooted in pretty objective science.
Also, you're in control of it, which is good,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not always in control of that. You take something like nutrition, for example. Sometimes our body does things that we don't like. I know quite a few people that, well, there might actually be one in this room that is lactose sensitive.
Mm.
And that would really, I would have a bad life if that happened. I think I would struggle more than most people. Not because I scull a gallon of milk every day when I wake up. I know I use gallon. That's not
Mm.
even the metric we use here. But
Pint?
no, liter.
Ah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do have to like say that would be limiting for me and I would have no control over it, right? They
Mm.
try to do it. They try to give you medication where you can have something and then take a pill and then you don't go to the toilet or something. But it's still something you're not in control of.
Yeah.
Resistance training, there's things you aren't in control of, but the resistance is the thing you are in control of, right? So I suppose sometimes it's like in life, it's about highlighting. Well, you know what they say to people when you're emotionally, you're upset, you're
Hmm.
angry, you're sad. Well, just focus on what you can control.
Mm.
And we should probably, I think of it the same way. But why do you think, what do you think some of the idea behind is and the mentality behind people trying to constantly focus on the aspects that they can't control, like their genetics or the amount of time that they can train for or how tired they get? Everyone always kind of constantly blaming another reason
Mm.
why they're not progressing or they can't, their training can't be better, as opposed to just absolutely nailing the things they can control.
Horribly difficult conversation to have with yourself, isn't it?
Mm.
To take full responsibility for whatever your current situation is very difficult. And just like, people will bitch out of the last rep that they've got to do when things get really difficult, that to sit in a difficult situation and go, you know, I've put myself here, all of my actions and maybe an element of luck, but and we can can even consider genetics. And there's so many elements to genetics, right? Like your ability to build muscle, your ability to not bust a joint while you're building muscle, which is a hugely underrated element of genetics, right? Like that tolerance aspect, how bulletproof you are, basically. Like these things are maybe okay. You couldn't control those things. But to sit around and mope about them is not particularly productive, but it's easier. And I mean, like we've talked about it a lot in the past few days about like how the brain is kind of built to do the thing that's easiest, right? That's why most of what we do in the gym makes no sense to it. It's going, why would you make that require so much from one muscle when I could use all these other ones to get from A to B? And so in a situation where we're stuck, the brain, as opposed to blaming ourselves for the position we're in, and as a result, once we've kind of gotten through that, then focused on the things that we can control and focused on nailing those, we go, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. I'm uh I'm just not made for this, or I don't know, don't have the time for this, or don't have the money for this, or as opposed to sort of doing the absolute best we can with the hand we've been dealt. Would you say see it pretty similarly or different?
No, I would. I would say that it's, as you said, easier,
Hmm.
and taking the easiest route is natural, like you said, for the body to do. So it's quite common to see that in all aspects of life, not even just in relation to exercise and nutrition, and like we're talking about. Like it's super, even in terms of anything we do, or like for instance, we could be standing right now. There'd be nothing wrong with us standing,
No. We
and
might make the podcast a bit shorter, so because we just get to the point where we go, yeah, we might as well sit down now.
yeah, but it's interesting though, isn't it? Because standing isn't particularly hard,
No.
but sitting down's easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we're doing, but it's not really causing us any issues. But it still just shows you, even when there is no reason to do something,
Mm.
we'll still pick the easier option.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think it's for a while, I worked with explosives because I needed a job.
Oh, okay.
So I worked with detonators and things where you would worked at like a mine site down
Okay, yeah,
south,
yeah, yeah.
where we would try to blow up everything in the ground so that we could get it out. Well, I didn't get it out of the ground; they'd come later and mine it. But
Mhm.
it was something I didn't understand to begin with, and something I learnt was about explosions taking the easiest route. And when they first said it, I was like, "An explosion? Why does it matter how easy it is? Why it's an explosion? Why does it?" But then I started to realize the way that they did things, and and then it made me think about so many things in movies and stuff that were totally wrong. And I was like, although this isn't in relation to necessarily what we're talking about because it isn't human, it was another eureka moment for me that I had in these classes, and I do want to talk about some of that stuff. But that made me go, it's something that makes sense, and I've looked at it before and watched it happen and never understood what was going on. And so one of the things there is, we would put detonators in the ground, fill them with ammonium nitrate, cave a hole in, and then we would tie it all together in this big, massive fashion that we had to read a map. We
Mm-hmm.
couldn't read a map either. And then they would have a detonation point where things would start, and as they would go off, it would go across the entire thing. So everything didn't blow up at once.
Mm-hmm.
There was many factors to that because the hole, for instance, we couldn't put too much in. And we had to make sure that when we caved the hole in, there was enough that when the explosion went off, it went off towards each other as opposed to upwards. Because if you didn't cave that hole in, the explosion is going to do a shitload more of that than it is of that, or even that. It's way harder for the explosion to go through really difficult rock as it is to just go through a bunch of sand.
Yeah.
And also, it meant that when an explosion would go off, it would all sweep it one way. So if I had everything tied together and went, I'm going to blow this up, I don't want everything to go over there because there's cars and people maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it this way where it detonates down here so that as it's exploding, the explosions behind it are also taking the easiest route because this is just blown up, which means the explosion is going to go this way. And it would detonate, so everything would throw itself that way. Couldn't get my head around that at first. What do you mean? How does that work?
How clever are these explosions?
Wow, how do they know where to go?
Yeah.
But it, in a kind of, I guess you could probably find a way to create some sort of metaphor, I'm sure, but it just shows you that that's getting your head around that concept in itself can be related to so many different things in life, even when they're not humans, right? It's like an animal that will do something similar. Like you can tell a dog to get on a couch, and sometimes they'll do things that I don't know. Like we would, okay, sit on the couch. A dog will get on the couch the quickest and easiest way it can. It won't think about where it's going to land or how it should sit or anything like that. Sometimes watching someone sit down can take 10 seconds. Someone will, and they'll look at it and, okay. And then,
or like cats that like walk in circles for 10 seconds. Yeah.
It's almost like dogs' brains can't get there. I'll just do this really quickly because I can't think about it.
Yeah.
And I guess more what I'm getting at is some of those elements as humans probably wouldn't be a bad thing sometimes because there is people in this industry who don't think about shit, and some of them are great athletes because some of them aren't very smart because they're just, you see that over there, move it to there or get to there as quick as you can or jump as high as you can, and without worrying about all these different things we worry about, which you've seen with us in the last 3 days. You've seen us go, and you're like, move your arm there, and we're like, oh, and you're like, no, the other arm. And you're doing this, and we're thinking about it. You might have someone who just is a total airhead who just goes, oh,
yeah.
And you're like, yeah, perfect. So that, I guess, I'm using to kind of lead into things being easier and us taking that route, but also me not understanding something when it is as simple as that. And that applies to a lot of, I guess, what you're doing here. And that's what you're doing with RTS. And you're really just explaining things to people that over the last 3 days, I've realized we should already probably know a lot more about than we do.
It's really awkward.
Yeah.
It was, I found it so awkward that like day one, occasion one for me, right? The first time I took the course myself. And I definitely had a couple of stern conversations with myself afterwards going, and almost like a bit of a crisis. I was just like, and I had this reel going on in my mind of all the clients I'd worked with and all the things that I'd done that I was like, oh, I'm looking at that in a slightly different light now. And I almost had like this guilt process as well. So like I was thinking about all the people that I'd been charging money to for the thing that I was meant to be really good at and going, oh, I could have done that way like better or way more appropriately and that more, and it was a really tough situation, I think, for me to kind of get my head around, which was only kind of compensated for and more so by my like excitement to then get in there and start applying this stuff. But yeah, I'll have plenty of conversations with people that have been in the industry for decades, and a lot of them, like the humble ones, the ones that have open minds, are still going after that long time. They're going, every PT should know this. Like and I would stand by saying you shouldn't be allowed to be a PT if you haven't done this course. Like, I think from an ethical point of view, from a, we're meant to make people's lives and we're meant to make them healthier, to not understand joints and to not understand the tax that we're putting on people when we put them in certain positions or have them do certain things certain ways, it seems very negligent and almost irresponsible, because there isn't, like, we don't need to be qualified to tell people how to put muscle on. That's not that difficult. If they copy any YouTube video from pretty much anyone else who's put some muscle on, they will put muscle on, provided their joints can handle doing the same thing that that person did. The individualization, the personalization comes in terms of, okay, well, how can I make sure that actually I make that possible achieve for someone who can't handle the process that they took? And maybe how can I make the process of getting there a bit more efficient by increasing the stimulus that they're getting per rep? Basically means they have to do fewer reps, it might take less time, but I can't necessarily promise those outcomes. But what I can promise is, objectively speaking, how I've manipulated the science and the physics of this thing to place less stress on the joints. Also, I have to understand how the mechanics of those joints work, right? In order to know where they're going to be able to tolerate more force and where they might not be, where the supportive structures and muscles that are around them are meant to keep them stable and safe and in certain positions, where they generate the most force or leverage. Like that's all it, that internal perspective is important for me to have in order to understand what positions I might put this person in. But then equally externally, I need to know how I'm going to apply resistance to achieve the intended outcome with as few negative effects from it. I call it tax, cost, whatever, in the process.
Yeah, I think, and the way you've put it is a good example. If you went to an accountant,
Yeah.
you wouldn't necessarily expect them to help you make money, but you'd be probably expecting them to make sure you didn't lose any.
Mm.
And it wouldn't be that's not a great expectation, right?
Yeah.
That's
Your accountants don't make you that much money. That's your job.
yeah, but
Yeah.
they should definitely not. You shouldn't lose any.
Yeah.
And if you do lose any and it's your fault, that's different. But they shouldn't be the reason that you lose any. If
Mm.
you go to a PT, and I've seen it before, I had a client come to me, and she came to me after training with someone else, was doing rollouts. It might be a fun thing to explore, actually.
Ab rollouts.
Yeah.
Was she relatively advanced?
Yeah, she was, and well, probably not at this point, probably would be now, but was having problems with her back.
Kel Surprise.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. This coach told her to put a belt on.
I like it.
I had no idea how to respond to that. I was just like, or
Or
you're not ready for that,
yeah,
you know, and
I'm not even sure I'm ready for those. They're seriously intense.
very difficult to get good at as well,
Mm.
because you've only really got
Yeah,
so much to work with.
yeah. The progression process is not. It's quite brutal.
It is.
Yeah.
Overall, from a mechanical perspective,
Mm.
now that I'm kind of understanding things from the last few days, they're quite interesting when I think about them in terms of from the point that you start at to the leverage that you create.
And your strength in those positions is
Yeah.
opposing that.
Also, not to mention the amount of work that I mean, not that you even have to know mechanics to understand this, because you can feel it, that your shoulders are doing. I definitely have always found them to be more of a limiting factor for me.
It is a spinal flexion isometric, hip flexion isometric, shoulder extension exercise.
Mm. Yeah. But it's weird that in that circumstance where there was struggle happening, this other person's first go-to was put a belt on,
Yeah.
which probably wasn't a huge part of the issue she was actually having.
And it's not like it's a dumb idea. It might have provided her trunk with more stability and maybe taken the load off some of the things that were trying to stabilize it, i.e., her erectors. But in an ideal world, as competent and responsible exercise professionals, we should probably be quite comfortable redesigning exercise as opposed to trying to see if we can bring in external implements to give someone the trunk stability that they don't currently own themselves.
And not, yeah, programming an exercise that's too advanced to begin with, given that you've been coaching this person for a period of time, so you would
Mm.
know what they could do, right? And yeah, I don't think I laughed at it because I thought it was a dumb idea. I did think it was a bit dumb, but that's not why I laughed at it. And as you said, the idea's there, but there's lots of ideas with exercise.
Mm.
You could do this to make this better, but then it's like you're ignoring the bigger picture, as you explained, right? It's like you you're like putting a band-aid on it to try to like, ignore it, and it's just like, but yeah, what is it, and then I think I remember there was a couple of other variations like the exercise ball coming into it, where you put your leg
Yeah.
on the exercise ball and do like a reverse crunch.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff's fine as well, but still lots to complain about lower back. Similar things responded with.
Mhm.
And I sort of just said, look, I'm probably not going to get you to do any of that sort of stuff. And her response was just simply, good, because my back hurt. And I was like, see, this is what I would have expected that person to say, because there's so many different ways to train your abs and to
Yeah.
achieve what we were trying to achieve there. Whereas I'd been coaching her for a period of time and she'd done a hip extension
Mm.
and said, it hurts my back. I definitely didn't tell her to put a belt on, but I also went, okay, well, let's find out why. And
Mm.
then we went and looked at the exercise and we kind of established a few things. And so for me, that was a good example of kind of what you took us through in the last couple of days, and almost these classes aren't for us to feel, um, I don't know if the affirmation's the right word, to be like, oh yeah, cool, I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, there's a lot of times, I guess, in the class and stuff where you can go, oh cool,
Yeah.
that's what I would have done. Well, yeah, that's what I would have done with a client, or that's what I've done with a client. I'm not totally
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so you said you started with RTS 4 years ago. Is it 4?
Yeah. It's coming on to 5 now, I guess. It was sometime in 2019.
Yeah. And so then obviously you went through that period yourself of, wow, I could be doing way better, and look at
Yeah.
these things I could have done better.
Yeah. I've
Uh,
generally worked with, because so I don't ask me why I chose contact sports as my main hobbies, but like I get broken really easily. I'm basically made of glass, and so a lot of my perspective with exercise was how few of them actually worked for me, and so without having these tools to go through that problem solving process, that had been a lot of what had driven me into then doing this professionally, is helping other people work around things in order to still be able to do the things that they wanted to do in the gym. So and also like I spent a lot of time helping people. Like I had loads and loads of friends for a period of like between 20, when I was first an engineer based in Singapore and Australia, I had loads of friends. Almost all of my friends were physiotherapists. And what they would always complain about is how there weren't many PTs equipped for the bit between when someone's just finished being covered by insurance for physical therapy and people that were like, "Hi, I'm a bit of a weight, but I'm perfectly capable. Like, I'd like to lose body fat and get muscle." And there weren't many people for that. Like, they were all really frustrated with the fact that they'd get people just about capable to survive in the real world again, but no one was really helping them out of that and into the like quite capable category. So that's a lot of what my focus was, and that's kind of what had driven a lot of the people that I worked with. But as a result, when I was faced with the tools to solve problems better, I became much more conscious of the problems that I hadn't yet solved quite as efficiently as I could have. I think working with general population people generally in terms of body composition and just the general function and people wanting to be fitter, stronger, healthier, that kind of stuff, it doesn't necessarily make quite as dramatic a difference, because you're going, oh yeah, actually now I know this stuff, I could probably do things 20-30% more efficiently maybe. But when you're with really broken people that you're cracking your head against the table trying to find the one thing that might work, when you suddenly get the thought processes and the tools to do that, and you're like, then you're going, as opposed to, oh, we've been doing things at like 60 and we could have been doing them at 90%. I'm going, we've been managing nothing because I haven't managed to find the thing yet. And then suddenly I'm given the thing and I'm like, oh, we've just gone from 0 to 90. So that's why I had a little bit more, I'd say, of a slightly existential crisis than a lot of people would in that situation.
But then obviously you'd met Tom and Mark and sort of got to be around people that you'd obviously done the course, but obviously meeting those guys and being mentored to an extent, you would say, you would you were able to understand things and gain knowledge in a way that I guess not everyone would be as lucky to, given that you're now in the position that you're in, right? Because we can all do the course
Yeah.
and it's great, but you had firsthand experience with some pretty not only intelligent people, but I mean, I've only just found out about Tom, and he sounds like a mad scientist, and I'm really interested to learn more about the way that he looks at things, because the fact that he's obviously behind what you're now representing, I've only just had a peek into what it is.
Yeah.
So that in itself, like, what was that experience like? You told us about when you went to the course. You rocked up late.
Yeah. Well, I was like, I was only there because like some guys on my team were also attending, and I was like, I can't be the one that hasn't. Um, but what happened over that course is for the next 4 days, that was how it used to be structured. I was all over the place. I was like, someone had opened Pandora's box, and what was fun for me is that I could, as soon as someone told me that I could use these tools that I had from being an engineer, I could start figuring out a ton of things myself because I already had the kind of the background to do so. And so I was like, hand up in the air every 5-10 minutes, and if I didn't put my hand up in the air for 10 minutes, Slavin would look at me and go, "Really? Nothing? You're right." And at the end of it, he tells me to hang back, and I thought I was in trouble. We had an argument at one point because I was arguing about something about like Ohm's law relative to the elasticity of the bands we were using and all this kind of stuff. And he had to like shut it down because he's like, we don't do that stuff at this level, and we'll end up on an hour long discussion that will take away from the class and like ruin the experience for everyone else. So pipe down. And and then I realized what this like the context of this later, and it made complete sense. But he says, Benny, stay back when the whole class of like 20 people gets dismissed. I'm going, oh God. So, like at that point, I now knew who this bloke was, and I'm like, my God, I pissed off one of the founders, the godfathers of the fucking industry. And then he goes, I've been doing this for, at the time, it was like 30 years. Yeah, it was like his 30-year anniversary. He's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've met fewer than 5 people that get this stuff like you do. And he goes, I think it would be probably pretty wise if you come down this process of like training to be an instructor. And training to be an instructor with RTS is a long process. It's seriously intense. It takes most people, I'd say, like we're training one at the moment. It's about 2 years as a process to get there. It's not one of these things where it's like, yeah, here's the textbook. You can go and represent us in this place, and that's it. But that's why we've got so few of them. But so what then happened though, which made things extremely fast tracked, is COVID. And then suddenly Slavin couldn't travel. So he couldn't go and teach courses every weekend. And I had nothing better to do. And so I spent over 10 hours a week through many, many, many months of COVID on Zoom calls with him, giving me stuff to go away and learn, and then mentoring me through the entire process of not just understanding this stuff better, but being able to run the course how it used to be taught before he and I have evolved it since. But also, excuse me, that the thought processes behind handling students' questions, behind not giving people categorical answers about things that there are not categorical answers to, and how to also sort of be professional in that environment. Because I won't lie, I was a very opinionated person before I came into this role. I was the quickest to swing my knob around and tell people they were wrong, and use like science to back things up, and or what I thought was, it was just science that I had available. It didn't mean I was right, but I was actually quite like, I look back at who that was and go, God, you were a cock. Like it's there's no pride in the way I kind of used to handle discussions with people and get into bollocks in the comment sections with people, and a lot of like that negativity that my approach had previously. Now, like the thing that I couldn't be more grateful for, and I talk about this, or I have never talked about this before actually, but I think about this in terms of like Slavin and Tom, in terms of not necessarily just the science that I've managed to pick up from them, but bearing in mind both these guys are in their 60s, and both these guys have been in this industry for a long time. They've they've acquired loads of experiences and stories, and I love those. But primarily the way that I think and how much more balanced my approach to everything is as a result of, because it's, if there's an interesting thing where if you can be balanced about this thing that you're so passionate about, right, that your emotions are so built into because you do the things you like, and you're so involved in it, and it's your job on a daily basis, and it's what's interesting about being a fitness professional is it's all consuming. Like, a lot of us will do this all day and then go home and talk to our partners about it. And then we'll go and that's including the hour of us doing this as well on our own in the gym for the thing that we like. It's so consuming. And I think if you can be unbiased and balanced and about that, the carryover that I found into like the rest of my life about things I don't actually care about anywhere near as much has been pretty dramatic. I've had a very unique opportunity to get exposed to this stuff. I will never understand how I fell into this position, how I got this jammy, but I ended up having an investor of mine in a business that I run in back home. Halfway through, it was like 2021, and I'd already been training all this time online with Slavin. I'd even run a couple of like sample courses that he'd helped me through online when I was delivering them, just to make sure that I did pretty well. And one of my investors was going on a trip to Vegas, and one of his staff couldn't make it. So he's like, "Do you want to hop on the plane and go to America?" And I'd never been, but I'd been meant to go over to meet Tom. So I get flown there. And at that time, I was skint, right? It was middle of COVID. I hadn't been able to make a proper living for ages. So I get flown there and then go and see Tom. And Tom's quite a reserved individual with new people, because he spent 30 years having people suck up to him and try and kiss his ass and try and become his new best friend so that they can kind of wiggle their way into certain aspects of the industry. And so things were quite formal and standoffish for the first few days that I was there, because I was just someone that Slavin wanted to train up to be a better instructor. So Tom gave me a bit of time. I got like an hour of his time each day. And then I was meant to leave after 3 days, and he goes, "No, stick around for another few days." I was like, "Oh, all right." And then we start going for drinks in the evening. And then I'm literally meant to leave the States. And he goes, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I can't go home. The borders are locked." So he's like, "Okay, you're moving in with me." I ended up living with him for 3 months until my American visa expired. I did some trips around the States in the meantime, but basically lived with him for that period. And I'd say now, over that following and multiple trips following, I must have lived with him. I've lived with him for at least 6 months in total. And like every day we're getting up, we're going to the gym, we're figuring out some new experiment that he's put together to test strength, or we're chopping up a new piece of equipment that he's decided he can slightly redesign, and we're doing that for a few hours, or we're working on some of the stuff that's going to hopefully take the product forward a little bit more, and develop our approach to it. And then we go for beers, and like every day is, and that's like the afternoon, and then the morning I'll generally do with Slavin, working on how to kind of grow the global business. But my time there, so Slavin was living with him as well at the time, so the three of us were living in one house in Tom's place during COVID. And I just got so much like constant, like 16, 18 hour access a day, because Slavin's a morning guy and Tom's an evening guy. So I had to like, I was hanging out with both of them, burning the candle at both ends. But so much access to such incredibly wise minds that are so balanced. They're so removed from their emotions about most things related to exercise. Certainly the trade itself. There are certain things that people in the industry do that wind them up a little bit, but certainly the exploration of the stuff is so unbiased and so objective. And yeah, and the thing that I think is also kind of crazy is how long they've been doing it and how thirsty they still, like the fact that Tom is still getting up on a Tuesday morning and deciding that we're going into the gym to make the 13th modification to one of his chest machines. is just insane to me. I hope I'm that driven for as long. I certainly think like the stuff we've discussed, right, about how when you get this stuff that how it makes you almost excited about it again, how it drives that passion element. I hope that continues for as long as it has for him. But the fact that they've kept constantly trying to push the boundaries, kept constantly trying to see how they can evolve things and how they can prove whatever they said last week wrong, is like there's just so many elements to the way these gents think, and so much that I've taken on board from them that I don't see how I could possibly have learned that anywhere else. Where, and the fact that it carries over with fitness and all this kind of stuff that I love doing, yeah, couldn't be more grateful, man.
It's incredible. It's yes, an
So
amazing.
jammy.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, man. That's just I just can't even imagine it in my head.
Mm.
Does Tom have a family then, or did you just live with him? Or was it just you and him?
His girls are grown. They're in like college and stuff. So I was in his girl's own old room that she used to live in when she lived at home.
It was just you and Tom.
Me, Tom, and Slavin. Yeah, Slavin was in one of the other spare rooms. Yeah.
That sounds like such an insane environment to like grow in. It just
Yeah.
yeah, it's you. I don't know if I probably give myself enough credit sometimes, but I think a lot of the way that I am is I cloud it um, with a lot of who I used to be. So I don't necessarily allow myself to grow to the extent that I probably should because I have that kind of nagging you aren't good enough thing.
Mm.
And I think that I always thought it was a bad thing. But then I meet people like you and I hear about people like Tom and Mark. And to an extent, there's an aspect of that there, just in a different way. Or maybe it's similar. You know, I don't, I used to be incredibly good at maths in school. I couldn't be good at anything else.
Mhm.
Right? I just was really bad at everything else. But I was always similar in that kind of way. There always was always an answer, and I always liked that.
Yeah.
And I probably went to advanced calculus stoned every day when I was in high school, out of my brain, and still somehow passed it, and then never did anything with it. But I guess it made me realize that there is that aspect of that there. And hearing the way you talk about things, there's a lot of that in what it sounds like in Tom and Mark
Mm.
and you. Because if you didn't kind of have that, this isn't good enough part of you, probably wouldn't bother with a lot of the things that you're doing. You'd just be like, well, good enough's good enough. And if I just train and don't worry about every little aspect, that's probably enough. But you don't. There's like this nagging other thing that's like, no, but there's got to be more to this. And that's always something I think I've applied in areas in my life that hasn't been a good thing. And it's probably been my downfall in certain areas. But I think a lot of the times we just direct things in the wrong way.
Mhm.
And you could have done that too, but you didn't. And then you were exposed to a situation that allowed you to, I don't know what the word would be. It's not just grow. It was like you had an itch and then you were finally given something that could scratch it.
Yeah, I guess.
And you probably didn't think of it like that. And maybe you still don't. But as you said, you did the mechanical stuff because you were good at it and you were like, yeah. But then it wasn't until you've done this that it sounded like the thing that you were really good at that you weren't that fussed about was then able to be matched with something that you are incredibly interested in because you're interested in exercise yourself, but
Yeah.
you're not incredibly good at it yourself because your body doesn't let you.
Yeah.
But you've found a way to combine something that you're good at with something that you love. I feel like to an extent that's almost like the recipe for like a happy existence, right?
Dude.
Or a frustrated one, maybe.
No, man. I when people ask me like how things are going, I say that like I'm just waiting for everything to fall apart slightly because it I couldn't have a better set of hands dealt set of card dealt to me at the moment, right? Like I am literally doing the thing I love. I'm also a bit of a show pony. Don't mind being on stage, so that also helps, right? Super comfortable being in a room full of people that are all looking at me. Like at no point, um, at no point do I ever think, oh, what do they think about me, or do I look okay in this way? Like I don't have any of that stuff clouding my thought processes. So everything generally flows pretty smoothly. I think you might have maybe found maybe you thought I was a stuttering mess. I don't know.
No,
Yeah,
yeah, it's the accent helps a lot.
yeah,
If you had have sounded like a blabbling Australian, I wouldn't have listened to anything.
yeah.
Like,
Fair.
screw this guy.
I'll
No,
take that.
but
I mean,
you're
it's got to make up for the lack of arms, right? So I'll take the accent anyway.
you don't give yourself enough credit. I thought, hey, this dude's actually pretty jacked. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
listen to what he has to say.
as if.
But no, it's like you're clear and concise. That's an important thing.
Mm,
I can be incredibly long winded, and it frustrates the hell out of me because it's like I know what I want to say in here, but this is almost trying to cover every aspect of just in case I get it wrong. So I'm trying to explain what I'm saying instead of saying what I'm saying,
yeah.
which is like something that really holds me back. But you've got a way of, I didn't find myself being bored when you were talking because you were able to remove any filler that maybe your average person would fit in.
It, I think honestly, I think you will get there with if you find that stuff frustrating at the moment, you'll get there because first of all, you spend enough time talking and also listening to yourself back, which I think makes a big difference. Second of all, you don't rush when you speak, so you're already giving yourself enough time to formulate things. And I think if as opposed to trying to fill things in to make sure that you're not ever going to be wrong about something in that regard, if you can get really strategic with caveats, and again, this is all learnt behavior for me, right? Like I was super babbly and would often do something like that myself before, but listening to the way Tom and Slavin taught when they've been doing this for so long, and every time they're about to make a point, as opposed to trying to sort of explain their way in and around it, they just go, okay, well, consideration, but bow. And like if you can refine what you're effectively doing, which is producing caveats to, well, these are the instances in which that might not apply, or these are the circumstances under which I might not be right about this, or these are the things that I don't know, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you can be like bang, 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 put them on the table and then make a statement, you've done the same thing but compressed it all. I'm not sure if that feels like it lands.
It does because I remember I heard something literally said once, I think it was in maybe the movie Ocean's 13 or something with like
Mhm.
Matt Damon. And he just said a line, and I couldn't remember any other movie, but he just turned around to someone and said, don't say something in 10 words that you can say in 5.
Mm.
And I remember it sticking with me, and I have no reason what, like, I don't even understand why, but I liked it. It was like, it's the same with filmmaking, right? I talk about it all the time I'm a huge movie person.
Okay.
And when something happens in a movie, if they take too long to show you, you get bored. There's someone that's really good at doing it. If you've seen any Edgar Wright's films, he made like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Yeah. So
Classics.
there's a great a great video on YouTube of someone explaining, he calls it how to do visual comedy or something. So
Okay.
if you haven't seen it, honestly, it's about 7.5 minutes. Even if it's someone listening
Yeah.
and you're interested in this, go and check it out. It's a great video just on literally, it will change the way you look at movies because it just shows you how different things are, right? And it shows you that, for instance, there's a situation in, did you see The World's End?
No.
That was the third one. So
Okay.
I'll say the one from Hot Fuzz then. He
Yeah.
goes, you could just show someone going into a new town, right? They're moving. And it showed you like a generic Sandra Bullock movie.
Yeah.
There's 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 music playing. There's this is Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Her car's driving. She gets there.
Yeah.
Heaps of movies do it, right?
Yeah.
Or one of the things that he points out is how would you show that someone's not only moving, but they're moving to somewhere with a different climate. The place, like, where they're moving is far enough away that there maybe might be a slight time difference.
Mhm.
It's taking them a long time to get there, and they're not particularly happy about it. So they did it with her, but it was like there was music playing, and then when she gets there, she got to go when she gets out of the car.
Yeah.
In Hot Fuzz, I don't know if you probably don't, but he's sitting at the train station, and then it zaps through all these really quick things of him sitting on the train and he's kind of bobbling around,
Oh,
he's
yeah,
holding a
yeah,
pot
yeah, yeah.
plant, and then it shows you lights, and they tell the story. They do it dramatically shorter and probably half the time, but it's significantly more entertaining
Yeah.
because you've still received the information without them kind of fluffing about. And I think that's really important in all aspects in life, because that's essentially what you're doing with this course, right? Because you could go, all right, guys, physics, and we're going to go,
Yeah.
right? But you don't. You go, hey, guys, you know how you like bicep curls? This. And then you've reeled me in because you've gone, you know that thing you like? And I've gone, yeah. And you've gone, can I tell you a secret? And I'm like, yeah, tell me. And so delivering it in that way, I haven't done mass amounts of courses, but I have done a lot. And I don't think I've ever felt what I'm feeling at the moment.
Hmm.
I've never gone, I don't know, this is weird. Maybe you can relate to it because I
Like
guess
a
it's what you felt.
tingling in the bottom of your pants type feeling.
I will have to change them after this.
Good.
But it's a, I guess without going down a bad rabbit hole, I've just sort of been at a point, I guess, for a long time, or especially in the last couple of years, had a few personal life aspects happen that can sort of um, bring you down a little bit. Oh, all
Mhm.
right, that's bad to deal with. And I guess I lost a little bit of like wanting that. Growing up as a kid on watching a lot of movies,
Mm.
there's always like these people with really important purposes. Sometimes in life we get a little bit like,
What's mine?
yeah, fuck. Like some people kind of don't care. I have people who are just like, no, man, like I drink beer and sit in my man cave and, watch TV, and
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, man, if you could enjoy that, I wish I could.
Yeah.
It's why I have such a big respect for religion, because some people can have so much faith and be involved in church and live in a nice neighborhood, and that really fills their cup. I get distracted. I get distracted by not doing anything significant and not knowing the answers to things and kind of not challenging myself. So if I'm getting up every day and feel really comfortable, something's wrong.
Mm.
Like, and you know, that's why I guess to me, sometimes when people will be like, fuck, you did a couple of podcasts that day and then you did that thing and it was a really long day. Aren't you drained? And I'm like, no, because I still feel like I didn't do enough. I still had that half an hour where I didn't do anything, or I still had that hour where I didn't do anything. I've got more in me. I could have done more. And that's the way I feel about training. So when you come along and you supply me all these answers with this course and give me all this kind of new stuff to think about, now I'm like, the fuck have I been doing in here? Like, I've not been wasting my time, but I have not been utilizing it the way I can,
Mm.
because I could be enjoying this so much more, and I've treated it like a fucking routine.
And like a job
Yeah.
where the beauty of what we do is that, and it's probably part of the reason why you're not knackered when you get home after doing all those things on that list on a certain day, is we're so blessed in that we get to do like something that we enjoy and that allows us to move and allows us to interact with people. Like that's getting more and more rare in an occupation these days. And like, so you're almost like stimulated and not taken away from by your work, but like the fact that it can become more fascinating and more engaging and more exciting, because you can now do these things and experiment with these things, and it's like, if you're someone that's driven by that, like, oh, it's not quite enough thing. One of Slavin's favorite quotes is from the brand Kaiser. They make that pneumatic uh, uh, resistance equipment.
I think so, actually.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
mentioned it the other day,
I
right? So
did. Yeah.
so they produce equipment where it's not a weight stack; it's a piston that compresses and expands as you do a movement. And as a result, there's no inertia, and there's all sorts of cool stuff about it. But their slogan at one stage was, "When good enough isn't," and it's bloody good.
I like it.
And I think Slavin puts it on like some of the intro videos to what we do. Like he puts the Kaiser logo there, obviously, as well, just to make sure that we're not ripping anyone's content off. But hashtag ethics. But the that is like a massive part of what we do. Like just being stood next to Tom whenever we're doing anything, and him going, and then he turns to me and goes, "What am I missing?" I'm like, uh, as if I'm going to know. As if his mind is looking at this thing and he's asking me. And like occasionally I do, like I would say, out of maybe being more naive or just it being a different brain. I do actually come up with the occasional thing. It's pretty rare, but we're on slightly different levels. But he's constantly looking for that, and that's what keeps this fun. And I think as long as you find that element of things exciting. And I think there's coaches that maybe haven't been as diligent with their work, and maybe are like the gap in between like what they thought they knew is like dramatic. They can get quite daunted by it. In some situations you can be going, oh my god, I thought this was like a fun, easy, sort of not frivolous, but just a trivial occupation where I just got to stand here and I could have music playing in the gym and I got to count reps and tell people they're doing a great job. And now this all sounds like a bit much. But hey, if your value is music and counting, then you're going to be the same as a group class, basically, right? So it depends what you're looking for out of life.
Not wrong though. I think problem we have is, well, I guess it's not a problem for some people, as you say, but things can get oversimplified.
Mm.
And you'd probably have it. I don't know what kind of environment you're in. I guess I'm used to people just treating everything like it's just so much effort. People in my family do not understand me. Not a single person, because no one's athletic, not anyone. I'm not even like over exaggerating, not a single person. So I don't even talk to them about it now because it's just like,
You're telling me, do any of them have your rib cage?
no.
Because it's a disgusting waste of genetics otherwise.
Never had someone compliment my rib cage to this extent. I got my rib cage from my father, but we aren't in contact. And I always thought it was a bad thing. But you've made me feel a lot better about it.
mate, I'd swap in a heartbeat.
What's
Yeah.
the significance of it in conjunction to the rest of my body, though? I definitely wish I had bigger legs. That would have been better.
But that's not a bone structure thing that's going to give you a dramatic advantage. Maybe the joint itself being like thicker.
Yeah, knees probably is maybe more what I'm referring to. That would have been nice, just
Yeah.
so they could handle a little bit more, or maybe even just it would have been better to have a vastus medialis. It's just not. It just doesn't even. It's not even there. But it's weirdly enough that I can squat quite well. So it is very strange that in those sort of ways. But at the same time, as you would know, and it's a funny thing that gets talked about with biomechanics, right? It's like you, Mark, Tom, some of the other people that talk about it in the industry, we'll leave it there. No one's big, right? I don't see too many people that speak. When I say no one, but what I mean when I talk about you four guys.
Well, you should have seen Mark and Tom when they weren't in their 60s.
Well, I haven't seen a photo of them. But that's
Have you not seen an old photo of Tom?
I've got no idea. No, I've just come across him now.
I mean, he was state bodybuilding champion in the 80s. Yeah, I mean, like he was training in Venice Beach with like the top bodybuilders of that era.
Oh.
There was he's got really cool stories, right? But like there was a point where when he was the top bodybuilder in Oklahoma, and bearing in mind the guy's like 6'3" or something, so like big lump, and he moved to Venice because he's going, well, look, I love doing this thing, and I'm pretty good for my state, so if I want to do this thing properly, I probably need to go where all the top people who are doing it. And he tells a story about how he was like looking at, they used to like release in magazines, right? Like the bodybuilders and the ranks. And they released the top 10 and he's going, I tell you what, but if I build up a bit of this and a bit of that and I do this a bit better, I could definitely take them and I could probably take him and I might. And he's looking at this thinking he could be like one of the top 10 bodybuilders in America. And then that's when bodybuilding just took off. And there were X number of heavyweights in the division, in the magazines that year. The next year, it was like 12 times the number of people were in there. And so he was in that era where it just went through the roof. And I might have the stats wrong. He might not have thought he was top 10. Don't quote me on that. But he genuinely thought he had like a decent shout at this thing. But I'm pretty sure he hit about 260 pounds. So, or like, yeah, body weight. Like he was an absolute unit.
I want to specify because this is interesting, but I'm only talking in context of now.
Yeah. But it's interesting is it's if these blokes were famous, like and Slavin was a serious powerlifter, and so if these guys were young and jacked and famous now in this era of social media, there'd almost be quite a hilariously just different discussion taking place, right? Because it's you get the wisdom doesn't seem to apparently account for that much in social media.
Well,
No,
it doesn't,
yeah.
and that was kind of, I guess, pointed it out, and it could have been phrased the wrong way, but that was what I was getting at, right?
Mm,
It's like the people with the most information, none of you, I guess, because of how you understand the body as well, right? Like you're not focused on being a competitive bodybuilder, so hearing you talk about something that would be a huge part of a consideration possibly for someone who is,
mm,
maybe not, because they are focused more on just growing muscle, but I'm sure that people don't want to do exercises horribly, right? I know that we made that a point because you guys are focused more on joint function and health and everything like that, but at the same time, if someone's not doing exercises in an optimal way, they're not going to grow the most muscle that they can, right? Which, so it is part of what you're doing, but
I mean, if they're in there doing like low rows for lat width, then yeah, they're probably also not achieving the intended stimulus and adaptations they were looking for.
exactly, right.
Yeah.
And so, but because of the physical side of things, it's like people can't look past that and understand it. Where to me, I think that's where I was that for a long time, right? It's like I was younger and I was training, I was trying to get bigger, and then I was like, now I'm at that point where I think I'm finally ready to let go of the aesthetics and how important that is to me,
Mm,
because I now just see things so differently and understand function differently and how I want to feel. And I have friends who are 120 kilos and they've got so much muscle on them. And I've had people, everyone around me, I've got full access to jump on steroids and do everything. And I'm finally at a point now where I don't feel like I'm stopping myself. I finally feel like I'm ready to let it happen. Like I can be the person in a room who can stand there happily watching the person getting all that attention and being like, that's that, like, look how good they are. And I can stand there and just be happy that someone else is enjoying that and know it's not for me.
mm,
But it's really hard when you're a young guy coming up, you're lifting and everyone else is doing it. And there's social media is like in a weird place now where it's probably worse than it's ever been to not do that.
oh,
It's hard for me to admit that because it's for me, I feel weak. I feel weak minded to have been that much of a slave to it,
yeah.
and I can finally get to a point where I can go, I don't need to be the biggest guy in the room. And I'm happy not being the biggest guy in the room. And I'd so much rather just find fulfillment in my own way than chase that because you're not going to have that forever.
Mm,
And Mark didn't have it forever, but he's kept a lot of other things like in his he's got so much more than he ever had physically.
yeah.
So it seems like so much more important. And I feel like you're of the same understanding. You got to a point where you just went, my body's not going to play ball, and I could do all kinds of things to change that. But that's probably not going to give you the outcome that's really going to help you actually feel fulfilled.
In the long term, especially as well, right? Like, I always was a little bit cautious in the gym because I grew up with around a dad who played a ton of rugby, right? So he was constantly complaining about like his back and certain things that hurt, and I never wanted that for myself. And so then you pile on top of that the fact that I'm quite easily broken, and I'm going, I'm not too interested in that either. And then you hang out with like Tom's had both of his shoulders replaced. He's had knee surgeries. He's had all sorts, right? Like, and it's from going that hard at this stuff, and because he loved it, and like if that's the the payout for loving this stuff is that okay, you're going to see some repercussions later on in life, then fair enough. Like I, if you're driven by wanting to be a big bodybuilder, then as long as you're aware of the fact that there's repercussions to that later, and you're not living in like some fantasy land where your joints are enjoying having this much load placed on them in order to see some adaptations elsewhere, and in order to see adaptations that maybe your hormones weren't necessarily meant to produce in the first place. Like as long as you're aware of that, then you do you, right? Like it's cool. My priority has always been to be able to be a dad. Like I grew up with a grandfather that could beat me in a sprint until I was about 13. The bloke is, I mean, he was a semi-professional referee, right? So he always kept himself in good shape, but he was rapid, and like that. I always wanted that. I always wanted to be like strong and capable and everything at that age and be able to still like I get so much enjoyment out of the fact that I was able to go for a run down the beach this morning. The thought that I could go crazy on leg training and take away my ability to do that. Like Tom can't go for a jog down the beach. He achieved those things, and it was the pursuit of achieving those things that he had to go through in order to discover a lot of the stuff he did. That the fact that they yielded some undesirable outcomes is a big part of what drove him to go, how can I address these things? Because he's driven from both ends of the spectrum. He's driven from his desire and his geekiness to work with only the most fucked up of individuals. I was living with him when he got a call about a prospective new client during that period in 2021, and he's usually like, if someone calls him and goes, yeah, so I have my ACL construct, like, not interested. Phone goes straight back down. Couldn't give two shits about something like an ACL reconstruction at this time because I was also living with him when he went through his entire cabinet in his house, like his entire storage room, and looked through all of his records from practicing as a physical therapist. And we worked out that he'd done more than 50,000 hours with clients over his career. So he comes from a physical therapy background. And so he's super motivated by like trying to help people that need help. They also pay really well because they're stuffed otherwise, right? It's not just a hobby for them. They're going, get me out of pain, I'll do whatever it takes. And when we were during lockdown, this bloke, I think his wife called and said, "My husband needs your help, and we don't know who you are, but you're the person that's been recommended in this state." And he goes, "Yeah, okay, what's wrong with him?" And she goes, "Well, he had a motorcycle accident, and his entire leg got ripped off and had to get reattached. He like fractured and broke something insane, like a dozen different bones in his body and stuff like that. And the bloke was absolutely wrecked." Like barely, he died twice on the operating table trying to put him back together again. And you can just hear Tom's, like, you just see him going, and then, and what? And he's just like, not obviously excited about how damaged someone has become, but fascinated by the opportunity to help someone and to investigate something that maybe no one else on the planet can do. Like that is what at this stage in his career is like motivating him. And so he comes from it from that side of things, but he also comes from it from the like, look, I've been a competitive athlete and I've driven myself into the ground trying to achieve these things, and I've had to face these repercussions of it. How can I maybe help people achieve that stuff without dealing with the shit that I've had to go through? So he's got both ends of those spectrum as like his drivers that have helped this process of constantly exploring what this stuff out here is. And I think, that's why I'm aware I could never be him. I've never gone as deep on either end of that spectrum as he has. I'm not a qualified physical therapist. I'm not going to necessarily get to work with people from as many different walks of fucked up as he has. Equally, I'm not a competitive bodybuilder, and I don't think I ever will be. And so I've not had that experience in that environment that he has. And I'm getting more and more of those things because people are figuring out that I'm quite good at solving problems for them. So I'm getting closer to there, but I'll never make it quite to that thing. And I don't think I necessarily need to because he's paved that way by going after that information in the way he has based on his backgrounds and his experiences and then this mind that I'm pretty confident I'll never develop. I think it's a bit late for that. So yeah, but it's I kind of I forget why we were talking about that, to be honest. I maybe lost.
I have another question now anyway.
Cool, roll with it.
But considering that your conclusion is that you will never get to where Tom is or have that, comes back to a little bit what I talked about anyway, and having that acceptance and understanding that you feel okay with that, not wanting what other people have or want. Understanding that it's fascinating and it's great. And
Yeah,
we'd all love to be, you know, Goodwill hunting,
yeah,
you know, level smart. But at the same time, there is something that you want out of it all.
mm,
This whole shebang, this
yeah,
existing thing. And so you have your own answer to it.
exactly.
Do you know what it is?
The thing that I want out of all of this.
Well, you've got your own mission. You talked about it a little bit in the class.
Yeah, I mean, I'm massively driven by impact, and and legacy, and it's not even necessarily my own. I'm hugely driven by Tom and Mark's legacies. They've they've created something so important, and so little the industry recognizes them for it. And themselves, I don't even know if they care that much. They're they're quite happy with the thing they've done, and they're not necessarily super concerned as to like how it gets out there and how well they get acknowledged for it. They care quite a lot, and they're starting to care more later in their careers. But for a long time, Tom doesn't leave Oklahoma. He's like, if you want to learn this stuff, then sure, come here. I'll teach it to you. But otherwise, suit yourself. And I'm only interested in teaching the people that are willing to do that. It's almost like a filter system, right? He's not ever having to convince some kids that don't want to be there. If you spent 10 grand going to Oklahoma and taking the course and this, that, and the other, then you're obviously super keen. And those are the people he wants in the room with him. And so that's kind of how it's always been. And I don't know why I took this on as agenda. I think there's just like this weird ethical thing in me that I see so much value in it. I have so much appreciation for how much it's changed my life and my career that first of all, I want to spread that and give that to more people. I was genuinely slightly emotional today when you were talking about the outcome you've had from the course and how you feel about it, because it's that same exact feeling that I got the first time I was exposed to this stuff, and like that's the thing that I'm trying to give other people. So it like really hit home for me when you said some of the stuff you did earlier. But so there's that element, and then there's also just like I just feel like they have given so much to the industry. Slavin's like Slavin's put his body through so much by doing all the traveling that he's done to try and spread the word. And Tom has just spent so many hours like invested in this thing that I kind of feel like people should know that it came from them. And but the other thing for me is I'm just like, ride the wave, bro. Like, I love this shit. It's the stuff that I'm really good at as well. Like, I'm good at this and I like it. Like,
I just love that as an ending to saying so many profound things. Ride the wave, bro. Yeah. No,
that's
but
it.
it's about enjoying it though.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of, this whole process is fairly uncomfortable, right?
Mm,
Like spending hours and hours with
mm.
bands and on machines and in gyms and everything like that. Probably fairly a little bit lonely as well. I don't know the situation of your life, but especially if, for instance, you're staying behind at work and doing it.
Yeah, yeah,
I find myself sometimes here at night,
yeah.
and now I don't know how I'm going to sit still because I don't think I'm going to be able to not be like, but what if I did that?
Yeah.
And I want to try this because, like I said, there's that impact that you've had. And if you can have that on more and more people, it's critical thinking across the board. It's not just going to impact this. It's going to impact you as a person, and you're probably going to approach more things in life with that outlook. And I love the idea of global. I love that idea. I love that idea that's that thing, right? That's that feeling, you know, as a kid that I spent so much time doing, like watching the movie about the guy who like did something crazy and got famous for doing something, or he made music that people played 100 years later, or those are the ones that resonates with me. I would sit and watch that scene over and over again on YouTube to watch the impact that something had without realizing that that's what fascinated me.
Yeah.
The fact that someone said something that resonated so much with people and impacted their lives so much that people just couldn't get enough of it.
Mm.
People would pay for it or scream for it or just couldn't get it out of their minds. And it wasn't always necessarily something that was extremely appealing. People have done all kinds of crazy things over time to, I guess, become famous most of the time without wanting to, especially significant people. Because if we think of someone like a pop star or something, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because they're doing something lots of other people have done and it's catchy, and it's not that it means nothing, but it's not significant enough to me. Where when someone creates something that there wasn't before and does something that really that really impacts what we're doing here. Because much as you said about Mark and Tom and everything that they're doing, I really can't understand how I haven't come across any of this. It's been so long that I've been doing this, and I
Yeah.
don't understand why it's like this. Because I remember doing this course and even in the videos and stuff, and I'm like, this is all right, you know, especially the introduction. And I'll be honest with this and said it to Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And then module 2, I'm like, this is pretty detailed, man. Yeah, yeah. Tim's like, yeah, it's good. The third one, I was like, I don't know some of this stuff. I don't know a lot of this stuff. And by the end, I was like, I'm fucking worried. I don't know what I'm walking into because this is not shit that I've learnt before. And I don't like admitting that.
Yeah.
I don't like how that's making me feel. And then we got here, and I don't think I've been happier to not know things because it was like, finally, I've been so bored of watching the same things over and over again from the same different fitness professionals that I've been following on YouTube.
Mm.
Do this, don't eat this much, eat at this time, deadlift this, and this is how you should do this and focus on this. I'm so bored of it. And I always found myself just struggling to make sense of why I was doing what I was doing, but while anyone was doing what they were doing. And then you've got everyone from different perspectives. The functional guys
Yeah.
don't do any of that. All the powerlifters and stuff do all of this. Fuck all of that. And then it was like, I know everyone's different and we're all doing different things for different reasons, but something is connecting every single thing that we're doing. Something across the board is connecting everybody completely. And I
Uh,
can't actually pinpoint what it is because it's not just that we're doing exercise or doing physical activity. That's not enough. It's also different. But the one thing that we are all governed by that none of us can escape is physics, is gravity. That's all something we're experiencing, even people who aren't exercising. And
yeah.
so it's kind of the one variable that you can control, well, not control, but you can manipulate that will affect everyone and anyone. Where in a lot of cases it isn't, right? If your leg's that long, your leg's that long. I can't change that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you
You can accommodate it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I can know what I'm dealing with, right?
But it's through manipulating the outside, like the same stuff you're talking about, right?
Exactly. And that's I think what's kind of for me, that's made me go, I've done this for 8 years and I've been missing the fucking point.
Mm.
And that's a crazy feeling for me because I was just lost in what I was doing. And I was like, I know I like this and this is good and I'm enjoying it. But I'm thinking the same thing. Am I going to be able to do this till I'm 70?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm bored now. And
But you can see why this industry has such issues with retention.
mm,
Why so few people stick around for that long. They hit a ceiling in terms of their interest. They hit a ceiling in terms of what they can charge. Because if you're not learning to solve problems and you're not basically getting better and better at problem solving, your skill set's not increasing. Your experience doesn't count for anything if the process of if your experience has not been you trying things and figuring things out and getting better and better at, guessing, basically. But if we get taught problem solving tools and then our experience is not us going through, it's not 10 years of doing the same thing over and over again. It's 10 years of layering experiences of what works and what doesn't work on top of a foundation of being able to think for ourselves. And an experience not being, oh, I've just spent 10 years copying videos I watched on Instagram and we don't do them if my client doesn't like them, kind of thing. But if we've got that fundamental base and then we're thinking on top of it, then experience just layers itself. And if people are hitting that ceiling, then like, what's the point in sticking around? Like humans like progress, right? And we want purpose. We want to see where things are going to go over time. And if you do this for 5 years and you feel like as soon as you've nailed motivating people and you feel like you've, I don't know, figured out how to get them to buy packages off you, I'm pretty sure most people could count before they started doing this job. So then it's like, where's this going?
yeah, there's probably nothing less appealing than stagnation, right? Just
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing.
And it's like, I think I've met tons of people in the industry that are still in it just because there's nothing else they can do, or there's nothing else that would still pay them $100 an hour, or there's no like they're like, well, at least I get to be in the gym, and it's convenient for me to then work out at lunchtime. And if I got another job, I wouldn't be able to do that. And they're kind of staying in it, but basically just because they want to be, they're like being bodybuilders or something, and they're just like, well, this is the only thing that's conducive to that. As opposed to, I'm a bodybuilder, but also I love using this space that I love being in to solve problems for people. Yeah, I think I agree that it's bonkers. I could not wrap my head around how I hadn't heard about it, especially because I'm like, this is my thing, this is my jam, yo. Like, I like this physicsy stuff. How no one ever told me, oh, by the way, there's this course that like puts that stuff that you're quite good at together with exercise, and you like be able to do both at the same time. I mean, yeah, again, that a big part of that's almost not just like my mission, but my remit. The one I've been given is, okay, let's see if more people can find out about this and use this stuff, and let's see if we can like scale the impact of this on the industry. And it's why I come down to Perth to teach a little room of people, right? It's just like that's how we're going to build momentum over time. But
The most isolated city,
yeah,
to come to.
yeah,
But I'm glad that you did, because people go with, oh, everything happens for a reason. It does. I
yeah.
think I always thought it was a funny statement, as if there's things that happen for no reason at all. You know what I mean? Because to
Mm.
an extent, everything happens for a
Like
reason.
rain falls for a reason. Like there's yeah,
Yeah, if a tree branch falls out of a tree and hits you on the head, there's a reason the tree branch fell. It didn't just randomly just completely detach from the tree. It
yeah.
it
It's an odd
fell.
one.
Yeah, but it's a funny statement, and some people get frustrated by it. I hate it when people say that. I'm like, because it's right, because it's, and so I think it's comforting.
Uh,
Imagine if things happen for no reason at all, especially with the mind that you've had. I'm assuming Tom's head would explode if random things happened in his life and they had no reason to at all. Imagine if this table just caught fire. We'd freak the fuck out.
yeah.
There has to be a reason why that
And
would
even
happen.
then, yeah,
Yeah, it'd be super
you'd be going,
inconvenient.
what just happened?
There
There was
has
an electrical
to
fault.
trying
Yeah.
to work it out. Yeah, where's this coming from? Yeah, so I think it's comforting, but once again, it's that mindset thing.
Sorry, there's one other thing that I've just thought about that you were talking about earlier.
Get it out.
Yeah, I have to, otherwise I just won't sleep. But it's also on the topic of things being comforting. So I've for a while tried running like a fitness technology company, not particularly successfully, but that's kind of what I did before I really got into this. And with tech, if you release a product into the market and you think everything's perfect, that's a really bad situation to be in. That's terrifying. It's terrifying to think your product is perfect, because if it doesn't get taken up, then there's nothing you can do to improve it. Then you're stuffed. If people don't like something that's perfect, and you've spent so long and you're convinced it's perfect, that's not a good thing. What you want is to put it out there, see some uptake, and go, great. Well, how good will this be if we make it perfect? And the prospect of being able to improve things. And it was earlier you were talking about that, like not wanting to know everything, or it being exciting that there's things that you don't know. And you were saying how happy you were to not know stuff. And like, again, that would terrify me if I thought I knew everything. Like that's not not at all interesting to me. Then where'd you go from there? You just sit there and fucking masturbate and pat yourself on the back for how good you are? Like, what, how does that work? Like I mean, it's not actually an
Doesn't
unappealing thought, but
doesn't
still.
sound
Yeah.
that bad, but
the the uh the prospect of being able to figure things out and find things out and have new experiences and solve new problems, like that's a driver. That is what is exciting. And it's like, and what cracks me up is when people come on courses almost like not expecting to learn something, right? It's like, if what were you hoping for, almost like when you get here? It was like, I'm assuming like it's not cheap, so you were kind of hoping that you might learn something. And but it's this funny thing that we've got where we're like, ah, yeah, okay, I'll do it because it sounds like it's worth doing. But we don't necessarily think about what would qualify this as being worth doing. What would qualify this as being worth doing is if I get my fucking mind blown. Then it would be valid. In fact, the more decimated my brain feels at the end of it, potentially the more worth it this was. And so, like, that's always the goal. Maybe not too decimated, because then it feels again like that daunting situation that some people get put in. But I think you're in the perfect situation where you're like, okay, I've been doing this pretty well, but also now I've got some new toys to play with.
Yeah. I mean, more than toys, I suppose, as well. I've got like so much to continue learning about. And I guess
Mm.
that was kind of where I wanted to head with that because I mean, unless I come to Asia,
Mm.
which I'd be open to doing at this point.
It's only
It could,
5 hours.
I mean, it'd be a great way to have a holiday and do a course. I'm going to be itching to do
Yeah.
the next one, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
in the
if we get the word out enough in Oz and we get through enough intakes of level 1, then level 2 will come here.
Oh, I'm assuming that it will, but I can understand like working those things out and getting that many people here. But also like we're a little bit isolated in Rockingham. Not saying it would have done better in the city. I think
Mm.
this facility is the best place for it. This is great. One of the reasons when I came along and Tim sort of we looked at everything. I was like, this is
It's a pretty cool office.
yeah, yeah. And I actually have an office
Yeah.
in here as well, which I've never had. So I was like, this is good.
Balling.
Yes. So
And you've got thirst trap
I
on
do.
your desk. You've got gold tins on your desk, mate,
I do.
in your own little office.
Yeah, I do. I could probably crush enough of them to make a desk.
Where'd you go from here?
I mean, up. It's the only place to go. It's and just get to. I get bands, more bands
Yeah.
on everything. So that's definitely.
Please no. Please.
I'm gonna put bands on everything.
Oh,
But
God. And then just be like, Benny said this was better.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. I'm gonna quote you on everything.
Yeah.
Because at least I'm giving a reference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. But in the meantime, or maybe if I'm someone listening and I'm like, what are these two fucking talking about?
Hmm.
I'm blessed enough to be in this position to have done the course and had it presented to me in a way where I was able to digest it more comfortably. But if I wanted to learn more in the meantime, or maybe I'm someone new and want to learn more about it, and let's say someone was like, hey, look, I want to do this RTS thing. I can't do it for 6 months because maybe that's when I'm coming to you, you're coming to me.
Hmm.
But I'm fascinated by this idea and I want to learn more. How can I go about it in an appropriate way where I'm not just going to be slammed with a bunch of random stuff that I'm not going to be able to make sense of? Is there content I can try to consume? Is there books you would recommend that I read? How do I learn more about the thing that we're working on here?
It's so tricky, right? Because if you're looking at, say, social media, and even anyone who's kind of taken this stuff and tried to use it to make social media content, like, I mean, we've had thousands of students over the years, right? So there's plenty of people that understand this stuff and use it in social media content. And even then, it's like these random smatterings of things. It's like, here's this exercise, and you're going, hold on a second. Like, the premise of what we're doing here is not here's an exercise, it's here's some ways to think. And then maybe you create some exercises out of that. And it's really difficult from a social media perspective. On our website, I think we've got like a free emailing list where, and I'm going to go on another run of doing it now because I stopped teaching and I go traveling and learning for a while. So that's, I'll probably go back into creating content, but like I get that that's a tricky situation for a lot of people to be in. But yeah, I think on the rtsglobal.org website, there's like a little pop up that goes like, if you're not able to join a course yet, or if you're not yet quite convinced, sign up here and we'll like send you a load of like free introductions to some of this stuff. And I think that's probably the most like fundamental, foundational way to kind of start from the bottom up, as opposed to just like, oh, here's how you could strap something around your head while you're doing leg extensions, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, my head doesn't move anymore when I do leg extensions. It's like, okay, well, great, well, we provided support to your neck or some shit, right? So as opposed to just throwing random tools at things and seeing if they stick, that's probably the most sequential way to go about it. Is just some of the stuff that we put up for free on the website. The RTS Global, or RTS.global, I think it is, Instagram page, we try and put snippets from the course up there. That's getting better and better. Shout out to Maggie for coming and filming some of today's stuff. But even the content that we put there, like, they've always been very apprehensive about posting stuff on social media because it is without context. And the other problem you've got is that when people watch this thing about something in 90 seconds, they now think that they understand this subject. And they now go weaponizing that or using that to tell other people what we said. And we're like, that's not what we said. That was a conversation that took 90 minutes. You just saw a 90-second sample, and maybe we chop things up a little bit to make it a bit more compressed and a bit more eye-catching or a bit more viewable. But there's 90 minutes worth of discussion around the caveats and the context and the considerations that make up that conclusion. Oh, such good
It was pleasant.
alliteration.
Yeah.
Got a semi. And then the,
I love that you've got to ruin every profound moment by just saying something incredibly elementary right afterwards.
and then so it's missing all of that. So what we try and do on there is really just throw in the thought processes and throw in a lot of the content that is questions. Because the main thing is we just want people asking questions, man. Like that is what got Tom to where he is now, is giving zero fucks about the status quo. He's been called all sorts of things by all sorts of authorities in the industry over the years. Like some of his stuff on closed chain exercises is genuinely groundbreaking. Like that should have shattered the industry if enough people had heard about it. You've still got people in like physical therapy circles getting it completely arse over tit. But like his perspectives on closed chain exercises and how the industry perceives that relative to what it is, like I'm sure you'll get to studying that stuff at some point, and it's mind blowing, especially for me as an engineer who learnt what an actual closed chain is and how it's been completely misappropriated in exercise. And but he got to this point by not taking anything at face value, by not taking anything that he just got fed and going, okay, cool, okay, we're going to go over here and do that thing then, just like you said, boss. Like none of that was the case. And so that's what we try and instill with people through the content. And I think even if people started questioning some of the ways they do things or the way they've been told to do things from this moment right now, they'd already be on their way in that journey.
Okay, so what about Tom's stuff itself? Because I haven't.
There's a fair bit of it on YouTube.
That's kind of what
Absolutely free.
Yeah, there must be a lot of what he's kind of gone over. Because to me, it's like some people are a little bit. If they're not if they're not running a social media themselves, I'm assuming Tom doesn't have Instagram.
No.
You don't see a lot of stuff, right? Unless you really look for it. And sometimes it can be incredibly hard to find stuff. So I brought up to you before about Mike Mensa. Mike Mensa's a funny one where all this stuff's coming out about him now. But I think he died in like 2003, maybe 2006. It might have, I think I've got that right. I'm not totally sure. And it's like, he's not doing any of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like at some point, someone randomly decided to be like, I'm going to grab this old 1980 video, chop it into a bunch of bits, and then release it on YouTube. And I don't know, it's so strange that because it's being perceived as new information, but it's been around for years.
Decades.
And so to me, I kind of think the same thing with Tom. I'm like, why has he not shown up on my YouTube Shorts yet?
Mate, give me, what is it, 2024? Give me 2 years.
You're going to get
You won't be able to get away from him.
That's what I want.
Mate.
That's what I want. And that's the good thing about YouTube Shorts. It's like a disease. As soon as you watch a few of them, they're everywhere. And that's what I want because although that's short form content, but it's thought provoking. And that's how I come across people because I can go, yes, bang, interest. That's where it is, you know, and that's how I found a lot of people. And I want to say this before because we've been going for a while. Maggie's probably like, you said 4:30. Sorry. But you brought up something before and you said, no, I'll save it for the podcast because you were going to tell me a story about Mike Israetel.
Oh, yeah. You were just kind of asking me how I met him and like what he's like in person and all this kind of stuff. And like outside of like usual seminar. I mean, this was just like this story of when I first got flown to the States. That client of mine flew me to Vegas. And that alone was a pretty mental story because that's like 8 nights fully paid in Vegas, which was one of the craziest experiences in my life. But when I was there, Mike was living there. And so that was just, yeah, it was really, because we brought this up because you were like, oh, you were talking about some instances where maybe sometimes it's not that great to meet your heroes. And as a result of the amount of time I get to spend in the States and the number of and the seminars I get to go to, I've met a bizarre number of people that I kind of looked up to and that I see a lot of online in the past 2 years or whatever it's been. And like, it's just so funny because Mike is a little bit of like a strange comedian with a incredible science background online, right? And I was just so taken aback by like how warm he was as a person. Like when I'm literally, so I was in the depths of, actually, the reason why I brought this up earlier was I was in the depths of like a big Instagram debacle because I had called out this company in Malaysia that is actually based, like an international company that had put up content saying they'd come up with a new, more efficient way of training. You're meant to do like, I don't know, 10-minute workouts 3 times a week or some shit. And their marketing was around your personal trainer has lied to you. You like, this is the best way to train. This is the bit. And I was like, that's borderline defamation at this point. Like I'm considering personally that's slander. So I went after them on social media and it blew up. Like I got on a public Zoom call with the CEO of this company that had like thousands of people watching live. Like it was pretty mental. And my background's not like, I'm a stimulus guy, right? So when they're talking about the benefits of this exercise, I was like, I need someone who deals in adaptations. I need someone who makes really good content about adaptations. I'm in Vegas. Hey, Mike, any chance we could do a pod? And he goes, yeah, sure, mate. When do you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, next week. And he's like, cool. You want to come around here? Genuinely just like rocked up at this bloke's house with a camera and some mics. And like my phone was the secondary camera on him for like, because, he comes up with some great expressions and facial expressions. He's like super animated, right? I was like, I need to catch these moments. But yeah, like gives me a hug when I walk in. And I'm just like, this is so surreal. And like I've had nothing but those kinds of experiences generally with how funny it is, right? That you see these people online that have loads of followers and get loads of traction, and then you almost like forget that they're actually like quite normal, good blokes. Well, most of them. I met some bellends, but primarily good blokes. And that usually ends up being the ones that do quite well without everyone thinking they're knobs, right? It's just the people that are also clever and sound, as we say in the UK. I don't know what is sound a thing here?
If I'm going to be completely honest,
No.
and I have to excuse my French here, Maggie's probably heard worse. I was going to say sorry, but here
Yeah.
we call them good cunts.
Good cunts. Yeah. No, no, no.
Yeah.
I've also, yeah, or sick cunts.
Yeah, sit cunts is more of like it's a bit like more derelict. Like
Okay.
sit cunt, you know what I mean? Like for sure, but there's like if I'm talking to my brother or like something like that, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be like, oh, have you seen like, oh yeah, I actually saw him the other day. Like, yeah, man, oh man, he's a good cunt.
Yeah.
He's a good cunt. You can trust him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a really good compliment. Because if sit cunt, it's kind of like they're a little bit hectic and they're probably all right, but at the same time, they definitely have they have the ability to be too much.
Mhm.
And then
Okay.
like
Yeah.
hard cunts, you want to stay away from hard
Yeah.
cunts. Hard cunts they're too much. There was a video on this a little while ago, and there's a like an artist from Melbourne who talked about it, and they did it as a joke, and he kind of went through them. He said hard cunts they're sketchy, but cunts that go hard,
Mm.
they're the ones you want to fucking be around.
So good.
I'm going to stop spamming the C word now,
Yeah.
but the point being is, I think sound is much more appropriate. It sounds
Yeah.
much more pleasurable
Sound.
to the
It's
ears.
very, very Welsh to refer to someone as being sound.
Yeah, well, the two people I live with, I feel bad. I've known them for 7 years. I couldn't tell you where they're from.
I thought you were going to say you couldn't tell me their names.
No,
Yeah.
I know their names. But they're from the UK.
Okay.
And now it's funny because I don't think I've said hello to someone in months.
You're right.
You're right.
Hey.
I walk in, I go, "You're right, mate." And he's like, "You're right." But then neither of us tell each other if we're right.
Yeah. I love that. I
It's-
love that. I got that. So I grew up in Asia, but as a Brit, and like with a British passport, but then got culture shock when I went there for university, and everyone uh, would walk past you going, "You're right." And I was like, "Yes, I am. How are you?" And they're they're looking at you like you're an absolute Fruit Loop.
I like it. Like it's very efficient.
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm telling you,
Yeah.
but it's an acknowledgement thing.
Mm.
And I quite like it. And funnily enough, I don't know if it's overly British. British people are quite, for the most part, it seems, some are just my favorite people. They're never really too complicated, and they're just kind of chilled. This is all the ones I've come into contact with. Obviously, that's
Here.
a generalization. Yeah, I mean, not in all cases, but the two people I live with, and this would be weird if they ever heard it, but there's no way they're listening to this because we speak way too much about shit that they would not find interesting.
Okay. Yeah. If they've gotten to this point in the podcast, God knows what they're doing.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah.
But they're two of like my favorite people because they are incredibly pleasant and simple.
Mm.
I don't think I've ever seen either of them I don't know, be like inconvenienced by life. Even if something's shit, you wouldn't be able to tell sometimes. They're so calm. And some of them are so simple. And especially Alan, he grew up in a way where everything was real. His old man's pretty old school, so nothing's inconvenient.
Mm.
Doesn't matter how hard something is, he'll be like, no, it'll be right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. And I'm like, aren't you like annoyed by that? He's like, yeah, but I can't change it. And I'm
Yeah.
just sort of like, how are you so constantly calm about something? And it doesn't matter how inconvenient something is. It's always like, nah, you're just complaining. You're
Yeah.
just whinging, you know?
You don't generally make a big deal out of something that's not.
No. Well, but then I feel like America's where that's like you said the opposite of that. Maybe it seems
It
like
is.
Americans are.
It is the opposite, and that's one of those things with America that I find like quite crazy. Is like quite how dramatic a lot of things end up being.
Mm.
But then there's things that I love about America that I didn't see that I liked about the UK.
Yeah, okay.
So Brits are very chilled, and I love the sense of humor. But like, and I have conversations with like other Brits about this, so I know that I'm not like alone in this weird perspective I have. But if you showed up to the pub in the UK in like a nice new car, they'd say, "Oh, fucking, what? What's Jacob like, mate? Who does he think he is? Fucking, oh, big cunt now, is he? Like all this and that." And they'll be jipping you. And then when you get in there, they'll be giving you shit for your flashy new car. And like, whereas in the States, if you pull up in a new car, all the boys will come running out. They'll be high fiving you, like getting all over it, like super happy for you and the success you've managed to achieve to get here. And like in the UK, there's, and I think it's just like one of these like war things where it's like we we're reserved about things, and we don't make a fuss about things, and it's really nice in terms of keeping you like quite mellow about things. But that equally, it means that they're not necessarily, they don't get very excited about other people doing well and things. So yeah, I think there's pros and cons to every culture, and I like them all for different reasons. But it's just funny seeing like different dynamics between various places where you go. Like, the thing I love about Australia is the general kind of like enthusiasm that comes with long periods of basically prosperity. And I love that in this country, there's so much like growing up in Asia, the wage divide and like the affluence and the wealth gap is massive, right? And you don't get that here because people that do manual labor jobs get paid really well. And so, like in Asia, I don't have any friends that are tradespeople. That's just not going to happen because I earn X per hour as a PT in a nice gym, and they genuinely wouldn't earn in a day what I earn in an hour. And so I don't have any friends like that are normal people per se. And I think that that's kind of like, that's kind of weird. I
Mm.
don't like that. And even in somewhere like the UK, you still see quite a big gap that in Oz doesn't really exist. Like you can make a good buck like being a server in a restaurant or something. Like you and so that's what I really love about Australia is like that equality and that everyone's kind of on the same level, and then everyone's like happy and generally doing relatively well, right? Like they haven't had like the recessions that they've had in the UK necessarily. Like things have never really been shit here. Everything's been kind of like generally on the up as far as I've been aware in the 12 years that I've been kind of coming here. I've actually come here quite a few times. I came here for Lions tours when I was a kid and stuff. So I like that vibe. And then I love the active outdoor, go to work early, finish work early, spend time with your kids, your family, like all that kind of like everyone loves being outdoors for the most part kind
It's,
of vibes.
yeah, it's the FIFO money that keeps us going, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But mate,
makes half the country go around for sure. Like
exactly.
it's yeah. I know what you're saying, and it's. I've never been to America, so I hope to one day.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about all different kinds of people, I used to ask really weird questions at the end of podcasts. Like it was
Okay.
this weird game show, and I'd put people on the spot and be like, hot dogs or burgers? And people would be like, I don't eat either of them. And I'd be like, answer it really quickly. Don't make it complicated. And I'd kind of just like favorite movies and stuff. But it didn't always work with everyone because if it wasn't really molded to how someone is,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I get really shit answers, right? Because it was like, if someone's expressed to me they're not really into music,
Mm.
then I ask them what their favorite song is. It doesn't really work. So I try to get like a gauge of someone before I ask questions
Are you
because
good at like random questions though? Like, are you one of these people that go, "Would you rather?" You know,
I am good at it, but
okay.
most people hate it, so I try not to do it
Mm-hmm.
because people are like that would never happen, and I'm
Yeah.
like, But I've got a couple,
Okay.
and one of the main ones I always ask, and I'm asking this because I think it's good as well, because if I ever get to spend any time in a room with someone like Tom,
Mm.
I think, as you've experienced, it'll be quite fascinating. And I think that the concept of, like we said, meeting people can be that scary thing of whether it's good or not. But I think experiencing someone's presence is, it's different when it's about meeting them to meet them. Where I've always liked the idea that
Hmm.
you're around someone
Okay.
doing what they do, because that's why you like them in the first place, right? You're
Yeah.
not meeting them to be like, oh, what kind of shirt's he wearing? You don't care, right? And if they're, that's why when people walk up to people in the street, they're doing something. They're,
Mhm.
they're having dinner, and you walk up to Tom Hanks and you're like, hey, can I get a, he's like, go away.
Yeah.
I'm living, right? I'm not that excited by Tom Hanks, but I'm sure some people are.
Yeah.
So to me, I'd almost rather be a fly on the wall,
Mm.
right? But with Tom, you've obviously got that experience. So something I like to ask people is, if you had a day where you could experience a day with someone, or let's say you could almost fall into a role where you were just around someone, but it was like you already knew them, and you kind of just got to walk with them everywhere and do what they do and get to experience a day with that person. But the best part about it being is that it can be anyone ever. They can be alive or dead, and they don't even have to actually be real. They can be fictional. So it can be anyone ever.
Mhm.
It's a big question, and I've had some horrendous answers. One of which being Hitler. Shout out to you, Matt. That was
Wow.
probably the worst answer I've had still.
Wow. I mean, it'd be fascinating, right?
Same. That was his.
Definitely not what comes to mind.
Oh,
Um,
look, I definitely don't, shout out to Matt, no disrespect there, but it's still the most hectic answer I've got. Like, I felt awkward responding to it because I didn't want to be like, fuck yeah. Like, I had to be like, oh, that would be interesting. And then he kind of
yeah.
clarified by like, oh, just so I could know how his brain worked. And I was like, no, I kind of got that, but I think it
Mm.
was just the initial.
Yeah.
Everyone else was
At
like,
least he didn't jump out of his chair and salute or anything, right? Like, yeah.
well, no, he didn't. Yeah, there was
Yeah.
no heel. The heels didn't click, but it was usually someone's like a movie star, or
Okay.
something, or a lot of bodybuilders will say Arnold or something, right?
I think for me, and I can't think off the top of my head maybe who this would be, but I just like love to spend a day being that fly on the wall, whatever, getting that perspective on someone who I feel like nails like life and their routine and does that really well. Like someone that gives an appropriate time and headspace and effort to their training, who gives the right amount of time to like their partner or their family, gives a really defined amount of time to like their work, but then also has a realistic application of how much they might have to deal with social media in a day and the distractions that that might go through. And I just like I'm constantly trying to get better at that side of things. And equally, I'm not interested in one of these people that gets up at 5 o'clock and goes to gym and then goes to bed at like 9 o'clock and didn't watch any TV with their partner or didn't have a beer or didn't do any of these things that to me are part of like I'm not trying to become a robot with a routine. And there's things that like I like doing that I'd like to be able to kind of keep in there, but I definitely know that I'm not necessarily as it like I work pretty bloody hard, and I get complaints for that side of things, and so it's like, but maybe I could do that work better, just like how I could train people better if I was more efficient about things, and I'd love to see what that looks like for someone who and whoever this fictional person is shouldn't like resent their routine or feel like they're missing out on things or and actually well hold on, you should feel like you're missing out on things because everything's like a give and take, but it feels like they're missing out on things by choice that they almost are reveling in missing out on. Like there's stuff that I don't get to do with my mates these days because of how much I travel with work and because of the hours I do, and I don't get to go and get as blasted on the weekends with them because I actually have to like look better these days with work and stuff like that, right? So and I can't. And for a long time with my job, like I couldn't just afford to go out to the dinner where my friends with fancy employed jobs that were taking them up the corporate ladder. Like there was all these things, right? That I'm like, no, I like giving those things up. They make me feel like I'm pushing, like I'm doing well, like I'm working hard. But it would be quite nice. And maybe the way to be in this person's shoes is just to get my shit together and do my life a bit better. But it would be really cool kind of seeing what that looked like if it all came together. And just out the selfish reason of I'd like to then like replicate that and do that pretty well myself. That's what I think I'd like get the most out of, is just seeing that in someone.
It's a perfect balance.
The perfect balance.
Yeah, that's.
Do you usually answer these yourself, or do you usually just leave it there?
I've never been asked, I don't think.
Well, then let's go.
Oh, okay.
We can wrap it up with yours, because otherwise I might wet myself.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I prefer you didn't do that. Oh, actually, that's Tim.
That's Tim's. Yeah, so go for it.
Go for it. For me, it's a hard one because there's a lot of answers. Like there's like a profound, uh, there's like a profound thought process behind it, because there's so many different things that I'm interested in, and there has been for so long. And like, so that's why to me it's like movies or music, and someone's like not big on them. I can't get my head around it. I'm like, how can you not? They're the two biggest things in my entire life. And I guess I think movies, I always think that, because I'm like,
So you'd like to be in the like fly on the wall with an actor, or you want to be in one of these movies?
yeah, I think it's like a bit of both, because there's definitely circumstances where I think of the movie as the case, because people aren't always that character.
Well, that's fun actually, is it?
Yeah, that's kind of the difficult thing, right? Because there's so many different ways to look at that. And movies are a hard one, because there's things that you can do in movies that you couldn't do in real life. So part of you go like, oh, would I want to do that? And so it's a difficult one. I guess if I was to think about, let's just say like we keep it to like an actual human,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to pick someone, I think it would probably all I can think of right now, for whatever reason, is Robin Williams.
Wow.
Because to be honest, I don't know why I felt the way that I did. And there wasn't actually like a massive connection specifically to him as a person. I guess there kind of was. The biggest thing for me is when an actor's so good at what they do, I kind of stop seeing them as themselves,
Mm.
but a lot more than other people do, I feel like. Like it's almost like I can't watch anything of them in real life, because it like my brain doesn't like it. It's like that's not them. And even though they play different characters all the time, it's like something that they have about them. And Robin Williams was one of those people, because for me, it was like he just had the ability to make me feel like he somehow had it figured out, which is probably why the day that he died and how he died really affected me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I could not fathom this guy committing suicide. I was like, I cannot understand this. Like this guy probably had more energy and enthusiasm than anyone else I can think of. And I don't understand it. And
When you
that's,
saw him.
well, to who he was to me,
Yeah.
right? He was like, that's how he was to me. And the best thing that I like about it, and I think the reason I have the connection and I do to it, is there wasn't a lot of people around when I was little for different reasons in my life. And I guess for me, it was almost like I can rely on movies and I can rely on what they were, because if I ever wanted to feel like I had company, and if I ever wanted to be around that person again, I had full access to it whenever I wanted.
Yeah, rewind play.
I
Yeah.
was in control. Literally, when I was 18 months old, my mum used to talk about the fact that I would sit there and I would actually, in front of the VCR player, I'd push it back into the VCR once it popped out, and I would actually sit there. I'd press the rewind with my foot, and it would rewind all the way to the start, and then I'd press play, and I was a baby, and I would do it. And I didn't believe her until I actually like saw, she had photos of me and everything like that, and she would just, I
Quite
would just
dexterous
do
as well, by the sounds of
I
things.
just couldn't believe it. I
Yeah.
mean, it was once she showed me the VCR player, I was like, "Oh, the buttons are huge."
Okay.
That's not that impressive. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I was just, I've always been fascinated by it, and I think it's because um, life can be a little bit of a letdown sometimes. Sometimes you watch a movie and then you go outside and you're like, "Well, this is all a bit shit." Especially if you watch a really cool movie where people have superpowers or something.
Yeah.
That's where I think the interest from what's happened has come to me, because it's something so much bigger than myself. that I'm impacted by, but also I can't see gravity, right? I
Yeah.
can feel it, but I'm like completely fascinated by something to a point where it feels like that. And once again, it's something I have full access to at any point, right? If I have an idea, I can get up and go and try to put something. I could throw something in the air if I feel like it and watch what happens to it.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of that fascination that's come back again, where exercise just got to a point to me where I was just watching everything and it was like, it's just a bunch of shit moving up and down
Mm.
and I'm bored and I don't, and people simplify the shit out of it. That's problem. That's the biggest problem in the industry. So I was like surrounded by more and more of that. These two quad exercises, I was like, oh, like what do you mean? Like there's fucking heaps of them. We're gonna nail it. We're gonna talk about two. Like there's no other good ones. And like, why are we talking about I don't know, and even before this course, I thought about it. Why are we talking about those two things? There's something overly interesting about the way that we move as human beings, and just doing jujitsu sparked that as well. Because I was like, now I'm doing all these movements that are like the complete opposite of what I do in the gym,
Mm.
and that's fucking fascinating. I want to know more about that. And so I think for me, the idea from that, and probably the way I answered that question the way I did, is because when I'm kind of intrigued by something, or when and kind of what you brought up about someone else having it figured out, he had something, I think, that I feel like he didn't have it figured out, but to me he did. I don't know. He just made me feel like there was just this like genuinity to him, and like something that I think most people would. I don't know. I couldn't believe it when things went the way they did, and I guess no one in his family could either. And I remember I didn't even go to school. I actually didn't go to school the day that happened. I got really upset about it. I probably would have only been like 12, maybe. It was a long time ago, but I really wasn't. It really affected me so much more than it should. And to other people, they would thought it was weird, but my mum was really empathetic. She understood. She
Yeah.
knew what I was like. I would watch the same movie over and over again. I could just sit and watch it. And everybody else saw it as wasting time, but I saw it as spending time with people that were someone to me that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I think if there's an aspect in this, that if there's something about his psyche or his approach or his perspectives or whatever that you felt like he had, like he didn't have to have it all figured out, right?
mm,
He just had something of he had one of the pieces of this puzzle that we're constantly trying to figure out and navigate. Like he had that thing, and you'd be interested to find out like what that was, and how he looked at things, and how maybe you can take that on, because like no one's got it all figured out. No
no,
one's, and like even with this fitness industry stuff, right? Like you're not agreeing with everyone on everything. Like that's almost like the worst thing you can do. Like, if everyone had agreed about everything I said today, then I'm like, well, you guys are just lapping up the latest confident person that spoke in front of you.
mm,
If you're going, yep, no, agree, it's like, well, hold on a second. You can't just do that, and then the next time someone confident speaks in front of you, you go, yep, agree, and just disregard the last thing you heard, right? So you want that critical thought process, and you want to be assuming people haven't got everything figured out, but that doesn't mean there's not incredible amounts of value to take from them. And I think if you saw that in him, then it makes complete sense that you'd want to go and like be like, oh God, I wish I could have seen that, or had that perspective, and it would have been. And hey, you'd have gotten to meet a hero.
yeah, that's the way. Yeah, that's the way to look at it. And once again, it could have been not a good idea to, So, but that's the best thing about it as well. And I suppose for those guys, and lucky for their families, right? It's horrible to lose people. Imagine losing someone, but then you've got hours and hours and hours of them playing roles and feeling like, like I had people I've lost in my life and got to a point where I'm like, fuck, I wish I took more photos, wish I had more videos. And I'm glad that I didn't, because I spent more time with them, but they still got to spend time with them and have all these things that they can see.
You wish they did more podcasts.
Yeah. They could have done more podcasts. That would have been great. But I don't even like listening to myself, let alone other people. So, see how we go. Although I listen to more people. If Tom did a podcast, I'd listen to it. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I've got one with him. I'll send you a link.
Do that. I would love to hear that.
There's some really interesting stories in there.
I have so much in my head about what he's going to be like. So that I'll see if those expectations meet up. He sounds like a crazy scientist, and that's what he is in my head. So
He's a very, very good cunt of a crazy scientist.
I see what you did there. I like it.
Hmm.
Well, man, look, we'll wrap it up so you don't wet yourself, and Maggie can go home.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm just like, this guy doesn't live in this country. So we've been going and going and going, but I haven't halted it because I'm like, well, it's not like we can do this again. Well, we can.
I think as things look, I'll probably run another course in Perth around June, July,
Or
and
just the
then
level one again.
yeah, another level one then, and then I think I'll probably be back 2 or 3 times a year as things look to be shaping up until we run out of PTs here, or maybe the word doesn't get around like I'm expecting it to, but that's what it looks like teed up at the moment. So
Mm.
if we want to do this again with some of the perspectives you have acquired from mooching around and playing around in the gym, and you want to chat about some more stuff in 6 or 12 months time, then we can definitely do that.
Absolutely. I think that would be cool too because I will have been able to nerd out before then. So I'll understand things a little bit more.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, it'll be great. I really appreciate the chat today. And man, you ran a course incredibly. I've been to courses that have been run by people who've been in the industry far longer than you have. And the biggest thing that I want to put into perspective is that not many people agree with me because there seems to be this ignorance towards it. But to be honest, I don't really care what you know or how you say it. If you're a dickhead and the way that you talk to me is condescending, chances are I'm just going to try and learn what you know from someone else because I'm not going to be able to put up with you. I don't want to do that. And I might put up with you for a little bit to learn, but I'll get to a point where I've had enough of it. And not everyone's like that. Some people can just be spoken to like shit and be like, no, it's worth it for the information. Personally, I don't think anyone knows enough that they can do that and put you in a position where you have to listen to it because you can't learn it anywhere else. I think that the way that you delivered everything is a huge part of why I was able to listen because making something digestible and actually appealing is a huge part of what you're doing because it's what we do with exercise. Because if I make everything really boring, my client's going to be like,
Yeah,
that was shit. I don't want to do that again. I have to make it somewhat enjoyable and fun.
and like accessible, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like because otherwise it's just jargon to them, and they're kind of like, I don't even words, any kind of explanation with the body. I just don't even go over it.
Yeah.
I just literally treat my clients like they have no interest in it, and then they ask questions, and then that's what kind of makes everything happen more naturally. If I'm just spitting stuff at them, they're just going to be like, so 3 sets of 10, or like,
I'd be interested to see if you feel like your client experience maybe evolve slightly over the coming months as you feel like you're almost having more fun with it yourself as well, right? Because I massively appreciate some of the stuff you just said then, and just because like I'm just here to kind of have fun and provide value and share, and it's like a very collaborative room in that regard. Like how many times you guys came up with stuff or asked me to do things that I was like, oh, never done that before. Cool. Like that's not an ego thing for me. I'm just like, that's a great opportunity to be like, you guys rock because you made me think about something or say something that I've never said before. You made us come up with an exercise that I've never done before. Like that's all it is. And it was also like we had a pretty good room
mm,
to kind of work with there, even though it was relatively small. Like there was a lot of thinking going on, and so yeah, it's just had a good time, and I'm looking forward to doing it again soon.
for sure. And I think once again, the venue allowed us to kind of do it in a way where it was a bit more intimate. We're a lot closer,
Yeah,
and
great
yeah,
spot.
it'll be awesome, man. And eventually to experience getting more qualified with it because
Mm.
I'm assuming you'll be involved there as well. So, but even once you run the next level one, I'll obviously catch up with you while you're here
Yeah,
and come along and wherever you end up doing it. But to wrap it up, I guess I'll give a shout out to you and RTS, and I will give a shout out. See if I can get this right without even taking a breath. Ready? Achievement Apex, Power Pit Rockingham, Supplement Rockingham. Oh, I knew I'd screw it up. Here we go. One more. Achievement Apex, Power Pit Rockingham, Supplement Mart Rockingham, Thirst Trap, Ped Test Australia, Bulk Gym Chalk, and I will give a shout out to my mother.
big up.
Yeah,
What's her name?
Rhonda.
Go Rhonda. Big
Yeah,
up Rhonda.
yeah, it's very nice. Yeah, yeah. It's I like it because it's always easy to remember. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Rhonda's one of those ones that sticks with you. I don't know any other Rhondas, so
yeah,
shout out to all the Rhondas. You
mate.
know? Yeah,
They can all have a big up.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Man, thanks for being here. Let's do it again. But
that's it
what
for me.
I'd love to do, one quick thing. I want to end the podcast with you doing a quote because you have been dropping some absolute bangers. You can either pick a favorite one or choose one you've already said, but you can say it and then I'll go bang. Really impactful.
we'll stick with some of the exercise stuff, sort of the Tom Purvis stuff, and how he defines personal training. Tom defines personal training as teaching our clients to own their bodies and then using resistance to challenge that.